Welcome back, everybody. You're tuned into HODB, Hot on the Block, and we're coming to you live to a global audience. Just want to thank everybody who checks in, who tunes in. And if you haven't registered, go to HODBnetwork.com, releasing the new distribution platform. And it's also an interactive shopping network. So check it out, register. And again, just thank you, for being part of the HODB brand architecture. So we have a special guest tonight. We have Travis Ellison with us tonight. Mr. Ellison, what's going on, man?
Oh, nothing too much. Doing pretty good.
All right. So, Mr. Ellison, man, you're an entrepreneur, a visionary. I'm very familiar, with your works, what you're currently doing. But, for people that are just, being introduced to you, in your own words, man, like, before we get into what are you currently working on, like, where does this all begin?
But it all begins in my hometown of Alachua, Florida. I was born in Gainesville, Florida, raised in Alachua, Florida, so that's where it all started at.
Okay, very cool.
For me.
Very cool, man. And very significant, what you're currently doing right now, as far as being an instrument and a vehicle that also helps other brands like get their stories out there. And you create, you have some books out. Let's kind of like just rewind a bit. Maybe take us back to like your youth. Like, how did you get started, being a creative person?
Well, around the age 11 or 12, that's when I really started listening to rap music and being influenced by, the hip-hop culture and all that. So around 12, I started rapping myself. Fast forward, my 20s, still doing the same thing, still rhyming. And fast forward up until now, I'm still, rapping and, doing my own music. And I got about 6 mixtapes out, and I have 2 singles that I have out that I'm, pushing. So, I'm still active on that end.
Very cool. Okay, so can you tell us, what are you currently working on now?
Well, besides from the music, I also have my management label, which is called T.Ellis Entertainment. I have 2 artists, Shanda Transmit, and I have Baby Millions. And I also have a model called Chinese Love. She's in that thing. And besides from that, I also have my magazine, Music Culture Magazine. It caters to all fields of entertainment. And besides from the magazine, I have my network, which is called Ellis TV Network, that consists of interviews, skits, shows, music, reality TV. It consists of it all. And then besides from that, I have Ellis Production that consists of the movie my own movie that I'm working on. I'm shooting it, directing it, starring in it. I wrote it. It's called Lord Lost in Life. And that also consists of shooting other artists' videos. Then I have my clothing brand, which is called 50/50 Grant, that I'm also doing. So and I also write books. I got 3 books out on Amazon. Love Lost in Life, that's the first one. And I got God Survival Life, that's the second one. Single Motherhood, that's the third one. And I have a 4th book coming out this year called Caught by Death. That's going to be my 4th one. So, like that.
Wow, it's a lot. It's a lot. You have a lot going on. And congratulations, you're tapping into various markets, into various lifestyles, and you definitely have something for the people. Let's start with with God's Survival Life, your first book. What went into that? What went into that book?
Well, okay, God's Survival Life. In 2016, I had a large stroke. It was called the hemorrhage stroke. Hemorrhage stroke. It caused bleeding and swelling on my brain. So I turned my testimony into a book because for about 2 months I couldn't walk or anything like that. Left side was shut down, so I went from everything to the wheelchair to the walker. I done all that. So about going to second month, doing the therapy and all that, towards my last week of being in the nursing home, that's when I started back walking. So thanks to God healing and the therapist I work with, that's what got me back to walking. So I can tell anybody and everybody, God is most definitely real. So I give the utmost praise to the Creator, which is God, the Most High God. So that's what that book is really about, just my testimony.
Very cool. I think a lot of people could relate, people that are currently possibly going through challenges, and it definitely, it's definitely a vehicle that helps people, man. But you're lucky, you know what I mean? You're very lucky. You're definitely very lucky. Tell us about Love, Lost, and Life. What went into that work?
Well, in 2016, early 2016, I lost the ex to my ex. She died unexpectedly. Nobody knew what was going to happen, but she died unexpectedly. So I took what happened that was true to me about her past. So the title is real, but the book is fiction. So, when her passing, instead of me being drowned in depression and everything like that, I kept working my way through and everything like that. So, and just choosing life and hanging on to that, that's why I call that love lost in life. I had lost the love of mine, and I ended up finding somebody else, which is, the lady that I'm with now. And that's also what the movie I'm doing is based off of.
Wow, very cool. So were you always gifted as a writer? What inspires you to write? Is it your life experiences, or what influences you?
Well, two things. My early years when I started off rapping, just sitting down writing, writing my own lyrics, writing my own songs. Then sometimes I will just write stories and stuff like that. Because at that time, being a teenager, I was trying to write a movie script that I didn't know the format. So sometimes I just write some stuff and just call it, this is my movie, something like that. So so just basically, being a writer, having to write your own raps. Within the hip hop community, the hip hop culture, as a lot of us know, to be original, you have to write your own rhymes. If you want to be original and call yourself an MC. So that right there was always important to me. So, at some point it inspired me to continue to, to write other stuff. Of course, now I know the formats and all that, so that's how I do it.
Before we learn more about you, tell us about, your other work, Single Motherhood. What is that all about and what went into it?
Well, Single Motherhood, that's just all fiction, because I know it's a lot of single mothers out there. Plus, I was raised by a single mother, but, the book itself is just fiction, but the title holds truth because there's a lot of single mothers out there. And part of the reason I wanted to make it, I did it as a fiction base because I wanted to be more creative. creating like characters and building stories of each person I put in there.
It's definitely very bold, and and I think that it lets us, see, the kind of skills that you have. You know what I mean? As far as like creatively, like where you can go. You know what I mean? Because for you to tap into certain characters and develop these stories, that takes a lot of conceptual skills. So you've managed to create these great works. You start out as a recording artist. You tap into into books. You're a published author. You do a lot. Tell us about maybe like how you organize yourself. Like, what is your day like?
How I put stuff together. Well, for each thing that I do, I'm passionate about. So that's part of drive, and I just enjoy what I'm doing, and that's part of motivation. And I'm really just doing everything from the heart. So, and it's not all solely based off money. Of course, at some point you want to make money off what you're doing, but that shouldn't be the first reason, and definitely not the only reason. So, I just mainly do stuff from motivation and passion, and that's how I move.
What would you say has been maybe the most challenging part, from the beginning of your career to where you're at now?
Well, the most challenging part was when I had stroke, because when it first happened, not knowing was I going to be able to walk again, and not really knowing was I going to be able to keep living. So after being down for those 2 months, then when I got out the nursing home, I had to get back used to everyday living, being around, just normal stuff. So I had to get my mind back used to it. I had to get my body back used to it. So that period right there, that was the most challenging. Because, I could not have came back from that, but, I did.
Yeah, definitely. You definitely bounced back, and congratulations. Just glad that you're around. The year is 2020. You know what I mean? You've managed, to achieve some cool things along the way. What are you committed to today? Or what are some of the commitments that you have, for the end of 2020 going into 2021?
Well, everything that I'm doing, I'm committed to all of them. Now, I'm committed to all of them, everything that I'm doing. So, we're going to continue doing it and continue doing it. But one of the most important things is because one of the most important things in life is because I do have a teenage daughter. So one of the most important things to me is when my time comes, being able to leave a business and something behind for her. Generational wealth, passing down to my kids and her kids and her kids. So that's one of the most important things. Working for my last name, not my first name.
You help artists. Obviously, you do a lot of creative things, and you have businesses within your business and brands within your brands. Tell us. I know that you mentioned some of the artists, but maybe tell us some of the names that are involved or that you're currently working with now.
Well, as far as the artists that I'm like managing and working with, I said Shanna Transvent. She's a rapper, singer, model. She's out of California, LA. And Baby Millions, She's also a rapper and model. She's from my state, Florida. From Pensacola, and Chinese Love. She's a model and rapper. So I'm working with her. So those three, they all got a lot of potential, and they all doing their thing in their own way. So that consists with Ellis Entertainment.
Yeah, Ellis Entertainment doing it big. Your artists are definitely hot, and and check them out. You know what I mean? Check them out. Um, Let us know, like, let the people know, what are, what what do you want to tell them, maybe that they don't know about you.
Well, I'm a down to earth, humble person. You know, I'm also a spiritual person. We got a relationship with God, and everything like that. And I'm also a caring person. And I'm also a father. Like I said, I do have a daughter, teenage daughter.
How important? Obviously, you mentioned your daughter, and she's very important in your life. Like, how do you keep balance, and how important is it to be spiritual in your life? Like, how do you keep the balance?
Well, being spiritual, that's just over years, like having a relationship with God. Over the years, that's just something you just kind of, you kind of work different for different people. For me, just having that relationship with God, and building a relationship with God, and continue to get to know God. I'm still continuing to get to know God, but growing up, like my grandma, God rest her soul, my great grandma, God rest her soul, like I grew up, aunties, growing up in a family that was, saved, Christian, church, and being told about God. But even though I was told about God as a child and a teenager, that at the time that wasn't something I was interested in. It wasn't until 18 and 19 when I started going through something, that's when I started getting to know God for myself. So that's when I started building my relationship with God. Even though they was told me back then, but I wasn't paying no attention at that age.
Yeah, I think like most people, they're very distracted. A lot of people don't control their own senses. They don't control what they see. They don't control what they hear. They don't even control what they eat. Like a fast food chain might own them. I'm always, I guess I'm always not surprised, but every time that I see somebody win a big prize or actually gets to a very high level of success, I always notice that those people will always recognize God first before anything. So obviously, like, it works. Like, just being spiritual, being positive kind of outweighs, a lot of the distractions. So very cool, man. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Again, we're coming to you live to a global audience. We're speaking with entrepreneur Travis Ellison. I just wanted to thank you. And let everybody know about Ellison TV, like, and the network, how they could find you, how can they learn more about you, and what's going on with Ellison TV.
Well, Ellis TV, that's my TV network. Right now it's just on YouTube. It got the skits, it got the interviews, it got segments, that stuff that I got now, and I'm gonna continue building on it, and it got like videos and stuff. But continue building on, like, getting shows and reality, so it's just gonna, get big and bigger. So that's what I'm doing with Ellis TV Network. And you can find music on there as well.
Yeah, I invite everybody to go check it out. Like, I'm a fan. I love seeing you interview people. Again, you bring the best out of a lot of people, and you're doing something very significant, man. Like, you know, I've noticed that you've profiled a lot of independent artists coming up. You give them a platform for them to share your story. So congratulations on that. And Travis, man, I just wanted to thank you for joining us today and for sharing your story. This won't be the last time. So everybody, you could just hit the show notes below.
But I do have one thing though. So can I give some shout outs?
Of course, brother. Give all the shout outs you want.
Well, I first want to give a shout out to my hometown, Alachua, Florida. And I also want to give a shout out to Gainesville, Florida. I want to give a shout out to said CEO. That's the boss of FOB Nation. I want to give a shout out to Black Dro. And to give a shout out to the whole FOB Nation. I want to give a shout out to one of my closest friends, Cliff Murphy. You know, he got his lawn service, soul food, all that. He does all that. And I want to give a shout out to my daughter. You know, she up in Georgia, and I want to give a shout out to my lady. And I want to give a shout out to one of my friends in the state of Washington. Then I also want to give a shout out and praise to the Most High, Creator God. And I want to give a shout out to you and your platform. And I also want to give a shout out to myself, and give a shout out to the hip hop culture, the hip hop community. So that wraps it up for that part. Oh, and give a shout out to Lead Rain, PC Urban Magazine.